It didn't start with tanks in the street. It started with a handshake cut short. On May 26, 2025, Uganda's military command publicly announced it has severed all ties with Germany, a long-time defense partner. The accusation: the German ambassador Matashua had engaged in subversive activities. A Reuters report confirmed the fallout, with Germany swiftly rejecting the claims as absurd and baseless. But for Uganda's rulers, the break wasn't diplomatic, it was personal. This wasn't about sovereignty, it was about sovereignty within the Museveni family. Because this move wasn't made by a civilian government asserting independence, it was orchestrated by a regime preparing to lock down power within the family bloodline. And in that context, pushing Germany out wasn't a show of strength, it was a clearing of the path. For years, Germany's involvement with Uganda included military training, logistical support, and counter-terrorism partnership. But it also came with questions about Uganda's rising human rights abuses, the use of torture, and its increasing repression of dissent. Questions that General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, now Chief of Defense Forces and son of President Yoweri Museveni, didn't appreciate. So, they closed the door not to protect Uganda's people, but to ensure the Museveni family could operate without foreign interference. This isn't a revolution like those seen in Mali or Burkina Faso. It's not about reclaiming Africa's dignity from colonial control. It's about insulating a dynasty from accountability. Cutting ties with Germany was never about decolonization. It was about consolidation. And that's where this story really begins. Because the German exit wasn't the main story. It was the opening act. The real story is unfolding inside Uganda's army barracks, in backroom deals, and in a new generation of power not elected, but inherited. The military is no longer a tool of state power. It is the state itself. And at the center sits the president's son. In this episode of Frontline Africa, we unpack how Uganda's most powerful family is executing slow-motion power graph, a uniquely Uganda style of military takeover, engineered by the Musevenis to remove scrutiny, rewrite loyalty, and lock down the future. Stick around, because what's happening in Kampala may soon be the model for every authoritarian regime across the continent. How do you hand over a country without holding an election? Easy. Give your son the army. When General Muhoozi Kainerugaba was appointed Chief of Defense Forces in March 2024, it wasn't a promotion, it was a coronation. His father, President Yoweri Museveni, made it official with glowing praise, calling Muhoozi the most suitable successor and boasting that he had spent 40 years with ears on the ground. That was no metaphor, it was an admission. Muhoozi hadn't just been observing the state, he had been preparing to inherit it. What makes this handover more dangerous than a typical autocratic transition is its architecture. Muhoozi controls the armed forces, which in Uganda means he controls the state. His rise wasn't built through public service or electoral trust. It was built through loyalty, intimidation, and generational power. It is governance by bloodline, backed by bullets. The regime has clearly used Muhoozi's sudden 2024 withdrawal from the 2026 presidential race as proof that no dynasty is planned. He even endorsed his father for another term, but observers wearing food because Muhoozi's grip on the country doesn't rely on public office. He doesn't need a ballot when he has the barracks. And while Muhoozi tightens his hold on the military, the civilian institutions around him are collapsing or being redesigned to serve him. Parliament has become a rubber stamp. The courts are compromised. Opposition leaders are either exiled, arrested, or silenced. This is not a political transition. It is the installation of a military monarch. Unlike past military rulers who seized power in coups, Muhoozi doesn't need to overthrow his father. He inherited it, and his father is ensuring that when the time comes, there won't be a handover. There will only be a continuation. But with every autocratic rise, one too becomes essential: fear. Let's examine how Muhoozi has turned fear into the family's most effective weapon. In Uganda today, fear doesn't live in the shadows. It wears stars, tweets threats, and gets promoted. General Muhoozi Kainerugaba is not just the most powerful soldier in Uganda, he's also its loudest. And his message is simple: opposition is not allowed. Over the years, Muhoozi has built a reputation not for strategic brilliance, but for brash authoritarianism. He doesn't hide behind bureaucracy. He brags. One of the most chilling examples came when he publicly took credit for the abduction and torture of Eddie Mutwe, the bodyguard of opposition leader Bobby Wine. This wasn't a leak. It wasn't a rumor. It was a tweet. According to a Financial Times report, Muhoozi posted images of Mutwe in custody, mocking him and threatening others. There was no backlash within government circles, no disciplinary action, no condemnation. In fact, it was treated as strength. Muhoozi wasn't punished, he was elevated. The message was loud and clear. In Uganda, brutality isn't condemned, it's rewarded. This isn't an isolated case. It reflects a wider pattern of state-sponsored terror. A Human Rights Watch report cited by The Guardian revealed that over 850 LGBT Ugandans have faced abuse, arrest, eviction, or violence since the Anti-Homosexuality Act passed in 2023. Entrapment schemes, police raids, and media-fueled witch hunts have turned the country into a surveillance state where even identity can get you jailed. And at the center of this ecosystem of fear is the president's son. He doesn't just benefit from the crackdown, he embodies it. Muhoozi's rise proves that terror has become a tool of governance. Uganda is no longer ruled by laws or consensus. It is ruled by silence and the threat that breaking it will cost you everything. This isn't theoretical, it's operational. And to ensure this system functions seamlessly, the family has done what all autocrats eventually do: rewrite the laws. Let's see how legality was bent to fit authoritarianism. When the courtroom is replaced by a military barrack, who defends the people? In 2025, Uganda's parliament passed a bill allowing civilians to be tried in military courts. This wasn't just a legal mistake, it was a full-scale dismantling of civilian justice. The new law gives military judges the power to try any civilian linked to military interests, a vague and flexible phrase designed to abuse. And despite a 2021 Supreme Court ruling declaring the practice unconstitutional, the regime moved forward without hesitation. In Uganda today, even the highest court has lost its teeth. This legal overhaul was not about national security, it was about national control. AP News reported that the law would primarily target opposition figures, protesters, and human rights activists, many of whom already face arbitrary detention and harassment. Now, they face military tribunals, often conducted in secrecy, with no public access or guaranteed legal defense. And standing behind this law, once again, is General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. As Chief of Defense Force, Muhoozi now oversees an expanded judicial reach, one that lets the army operate not only on the street, but in the courtroom. The state's monopoly on violence has been given a legal framework, and its architects wear camouflage, not robes. This shift means the very idea of civilian justice has become a threat to the regime. Courts are no longer institutions of balance, they are weapons. The regime doesn't need to disappear its enemies in the dead of the night. It can now prosecute them at noon in full uniform and call it law. This is not law and order. This is law and loyalty. A system where the military is the judge, jury, and jailer, and where the rules of law is replaced with the rule of lineage. But even laws need buildings. And as the legal war on dissent expands, Uganda is constructing a new empire, one brick at a time, and all under military control. Let's explore how infrastructure itself is being weaponized. If a government builds bunkers instead of schools, what kind of future is it preparing for? In 2025, the Uganda Ministry of Defense unveiled its brand new headquarters in Kampala, a gleaming $25.5 million complex built not by civilians, but by the Uganda's People's Defense Forces Engineering Brigade. According to Wikipedia's report on the project, the building was entirely state-funded, prioritizing military expansion while public hospitals remain under-equipped and teachers strike over unpaid wages. This was more than a real estate upgrade. It was a statement. The state is no longer just investing in weapons, it is investing in permanence. The headquarters is a fortified symbol of Uganda's new order, an empire where the military isn't a department, but the government itself. The project was overseen and celebrated by General Muhoozi. As usual, his fingerprints were all over it. He didn't just attend the ribbon cutting, he used the moment to highlight the army's role in nation building. But in Uganda's case, nation building means regime installation. The army now builds roads, manages national contracts, and handles infrastructure projects once meant for civilian ministries. The line between military and government is gone, and Muhoozi stands astride both. For the Museveni dynasty, military infrastructure isn't about efficiency, it's about enclosure. It ensures that even if protests arise or elections falter, the regime has a physical stronghold, staffed by loyalists, funded by the state, and immune to public pressure. In other words, a fortress masquerading as a ministry. And while this fortress rises, civilians remain locked out, not just from buildings, but from decision-making itself. This is governance through construction, not consultation. Progress measured not in right, but in reinforced concrete. And as Muhoozi cements himself as the center of this militarized state, one question remains: where is the world? Let's now turn to international community and its deafening silence. If silence is complicity, then the world is now a co-conspirator. As Uganda slides deeper into authoritarianism, most Western powers, the same ones that once claimed to champion human rights and democratic values, have gone eerily quiet. The only significant protest came from Germany, when Uganda cut military ties in May 2025, accusing German Ambassador Matthias Schwar of subversive activity. Germany rejected the claim outright. As Reuters report confirmed that Berlin called the accusation absurd and without basis. But beyond that, the international response has been a whisper. This silence isn't an oversight, it's a choice. Uganda is seen as too strategic to alienate. It's a key partner in counter-terrorism, regional stability, and East African security. That makes President Yoweri Museveni and by extension General Muhoozi valuable. And in geopolitics, value buys forgiveness. Western donors continue funding Uganda's budget. Defense pacts are quietly maintained. Development agencies remain active, even as the regime imprisons civilians, outlaws dissent, and militarizes governance. Reports by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and others have documented everything. But documentation without consequences becomes diplomacy's version of denial. Muhoozi understands this game perfectly. He knows that as long as he doesn't destabilize borders or disrupt Western military interests, he can do whatever he wants inside Uganda. The torture, the military trials, the dynasty, all of it happens in full view. The West just choose not to look. But the silence isn't just coming from Washington or Brussels. It's coming from inside Africa. The African Union, the supposed guardian of continental governance and people's rights, has issued no statement, no inquiry, no sanctions, no solidarity with the victims, nothing. As one of its founding members slowly dissolves its democracy, the AU maintains absent. And that absence may be the most dangerous precedent of all, because what's happening in Uganda isn't just a local tragedy, it's a continental warning. Let's now conclude with what this moment truly means for Africa's political future. Uganda didn't fall overnight. It was slowly surrendered to one family, one army, and one future that no one dared interrupt. Today, President Yoweri Museveni campaigns for a seventh term. His son, General Muhoozi, commands the armed forces, controls justice, and increasingly governs without needing a title. The Electoral Commission still exists. Ballots will still be printed, and rallies may still be staged, but the outcome has already been designed. This is not democracy. It is dynasty by design. From the German expulsion to the construction of military command centers, from torture made public to laws weaponized in camouflage, Uganda has institutionalized fear, framed it as stability, and wrapped it in national colors. The military doesn't protect the republic, it owns it. And the people, they are citizens only in name. What's unfolding is not just a dictatorship in progress, it's a dictatorship normalized. There are no more guards at the gate. International partners are silent. African institutions are absent, and internal resistance is criminalized. This is the final phase of authoritarianism, not just repression, but permanence. But make no mistake, Uganda is not alone. From Chad to Cameroon, Congo to Equatorial Guinea, dynasties are spreading across the continent like wildfire, cloaked in security, justified by stability, and unchallenged by those who once swore to defend freedom. The Museveni-Muhoozi model isn't just an outlier, it's a blueprint. And the question that remains is no longer, will Muhoozi take power? It is, why would he need to? Because in today's Uganda, he already has it, with no election, no constitution, and no resistance light enough to matter. Uganda's future has been quietly handed over, not by the people, but by the silence of institutions that no longer fight for them. This is Frontline Africa. If you value truth unfiltered and power reframed from an African lens, subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts. I am Ezekiel Enejeta. See you in the next one.